opens with John Henry Clayton returning to Fowler, Wyoming after years away. At his childhood home, he has a strained reunion with his stern father, Reverend William Clayton, who reveals John's mother has died. The Reverend, disapproving, confronts John about leaving the family and turning to a life as a gunslinger. Noticing that John is unarmed, his father questions him, and John quietly explains that he's left that life behind. He later visits his mother's grave in solitude. Some time afterward, John and his father travel into town for supplies. Most townsfolk barely recognize him, but the store owner, Mr. Parsons, recalls him as the young man who went off to war. John's father then sends him to the saloon to fetch some cider. At the saloon, when John mentions he's the Reverend's son, a thug named Frank Tillman mocks him for not carrying a gun. Frank brags about having killed 4 men, but John doesn't recognize his name. Dave Turner, a local man, intervenes and drives the thugs off. John remembers him, and Dave praises John for taking down Big Jim Westfield years earlier. But John, wanting no part of violence, simply replies that he's not looking for trouble and walks away. Reverend Clayton reveals that James Masurdi, a wealthy businessman, has been hiring men like Frank and even skilled gunslingers like DeVetto intimidate local farmers into selling their land for railroad development. He wonders if John's return is somehow tied to all this, but John insists it isn't. Later, John is shown chopping trees to clear a field on their property, a task his mother had always dreamed of completing, but never had the chance to. That night, the Reverend invites John to attend church, hoping it might guide him back to faith and help him leave violence behind for good. John dismisses the idea. The next morning, while his father goes to church, John stays behind to keep working on the field. After the service, the townsmen gather, frustrated and anxious, to discuss hiring gunmen now that their sheriff has mysteriously vanished overnight. Reverend William firmly rejects the idea, insisting that violence will only make things worse. He tells the townsfolk he's already reached out to the U.S. Marshal for help. But the townspeople argue bitterly no one ever comes for the poor, they say, because the law has never cared about them. Meanwhile, as John works in the field, he's surprised by a visit from Mary Alice, his former love, who's heard he's back in town. Mary Alice reveals she's been married to Tom Watson for 8 years and now has a son. She admits she waited for John, but after years of silence, she had no choice but to move on. Meanwhile, in town, Frank and his gang target Daniel Peterson, planning to force him off his land. When Peterson shows up, Frank brutally beats him in front of the entire town. John witnesses the assault and calmly intervenes, asking Frank to stop so he can take Peterson home. When Frank challenges him, demanding what he'll do about it, John responds quietly, "Nothing." Frank backs off, and the townspeople help John carry Peterson away. That evening, during dinner, John appears visibly troubled by what he saw. John opens up about the war, confessing how witnessing the deaths of good, God-fearing men made him question the existence of God. His father, upset, accuses John of choosing that path going to war to kill. The next day, Dave, Frank, and their gang show up at Peterson's farm. Armed with a shotgun, Peterson refuses to back down, but Dave speaks calmly, urging him to consider what would happen to his wife and children if he were to die. Peterson begins to lower his guard, but Clyde, one of Frank's men, suddenly shoots him dead. Mocking Dave, Clyde sneers that he probably never kills anyone, just talks them to death. Without hesitation, Dave shoots Clyde and dares the others to step up. None do. After Peterson's funeral, the townsmen discuss paying John $200 to protect them, but Reverend William refuses on John's behalf, adamant that John has turned away from that life. Meanwhile, Dave meets with Masurdi to discuss Clyde's actions, but Masurdi isn't bothered. He's pleased, revealing that Peterson's widow and 2 other families have agreed to sell their land. While praising Frank's aggressive tactics, McSurdy admits he still needs Dave in case John decides to take up arms. Back on the farm, John's clearing the field when he and his father have a heated argument. John accuses his father of secretly wishing it had been him who died instead of his brother, William. Reverend Clayton denies it, insisting that's not how he feels. Meanwhile, Frank and his gang try to intimidate Mr. Chadwick at his home, but the townsmen ambush them, killing one of Frank's men. The survivors, including a wounded Frank, are forced to flee. Realizing their plans had been leaked, Frank suspects a traitor within his gang and promptly executes one of his men. Meanwhile, John visits Mary Alice at her home, where they reminisce about their past. Before he left for war, she had given him a red ribbon from her hair, asking him to return it if he still had feelings for her. John tells Mary Alice she was right to marry Tom and quietly walks away, unaware that Tom has witnessed the exchange. Later that night, Tom asks Mary Alice about her feelings for John. She reassures him, affirming that he is her husband and she has no regrets. However, it's revealed that John still keeps the red ribbon hidden away. Meanwhile, McSurdy scolds Frank for mishandling the situation with the townsfolk, warning that his reckless actions could provoke others to fight back. The next day, Frank kills Chadwick, and shortly after, Chadwick's widow reluctantly sells the land to McSurdy, vowing to spit on his grave when he's finally brought down. Meanwhile, John and his father are in town buying supplies when Frank and his gang arrive, cutting in line. Frank spills his drink, then humiliates John by forcing him to clean it up. John reluctantly complies, but as he attempts to leave, the gang ambushes him and beats him mercilessly outside. They restrain his father, who desperately pleads for help, but the crowd remains silent. Mary Alice tries to intervene, but Tom holds her back. After the beating ends, she insists that John is her friend and rushes to his side. Mary Alice and the Reverend help carry John home. Meanwhile, at the saloon, McSurdy seizes the opportunity to convince Tom to sell his land and take his family far from Fowler and from John. Tom agrees. The next day, Dave visits John and advises him against seeking revenge, explaining that while they've never met before, he considers John a friend, united by their shared experience in the war. John reassures Dave calmly that he has no intention of causing trouble. A few days later, he attends church, bringing his father to tears of joy. After the service, Mary Alice warmly welcomes him back, but Tom intervenes, shoving John and demanding he admit he no longer loves her. John remains silent and walks away without a word. Realizing he had misjudged John and that he wasn't trying to steal Mary Alice, Tom decides to cancel the sale of his land. He confronts McSurdy, telling him he's changed his mind. McSurdy, furious, reminds him of their agreement and warns of consequences. Later, John prays alone in the church, and his father joins him in quiet solidarity. John confesses that after the war, he wandered from town to town, eventually settling in a small place called Norton, Kansas. One night in a saloon, two men started a fight, and John fought back, killing both. However, one of his bullets missed its mark and struck a young boy through a store window, killing him instantly. The boy was around the same age as John's late brother, William, and the guilt overwhelms him. He breaks down, blaming himself for the child's death. Meanwhile, McSurdy and his men visit Mary Alice, giving her just 32 hours to vacate, as Tom had agreed to sell the land. In desperation, Mary Alice turns to John for help. John, however, advises Mary Alice to accept McSurdy's offer and leave town to protect Tom's life. That night, Reverend William visits McSurdy, pleading for the Watsons' safety, but McSurdy refuses without hesitation. As the Reverend exits, Frank and his gang ambush him in an alley and stab him. Fortunately, some townsfolk find him and rush him to the doctor. McSurdy later reprimands Frank for acting without his orders. The next morning, John sits by his father's bedside as he awakens from a coma. Reverend Clayton pleads with John to avoid seeking revenge, fearing it will lead to his death. But John remains calm, insisting that this won't end until someone stops Itand. This is the only way he knows how. John retrieves the gun he had hidden away and stops by the store for an additional weapon. Mr. Parsons loans him a rare Lamont revolver, with 9 rounds and a built-in 10-gauge shotgun barrel. Armed and determined, John heads toward McSurdy's saloon, drawing the quiet attention of the townspeople. Inside, he calmly asks for Little Ned. John quickly kills Little Ned with a Lamont. Guns drawn, he warns the remaining men in the saloon to leave if they don't want to die. Those who hesitate quickly flee. With deadly precision, John takes down the rest, sparing only Frank, who retreats upstairs only to be shot in the head moments later. As John steps out of the saloon, he is confronted by Dave. John tells Dave to walk away, but Dave refuses, bound by his obligations. They prepare to draw. John acknowledges that the Lamont is heavy and puts him at a disadvantage, asking Dave to let him step back into the saloon for his Colt. Dave agrees. Once inside, John grabs his gun, but instead of returning, he heads upstairs to confront Maserti. Maserti stands nervously by the window, his gun trembling in his hand, but John is faster. He shoots McCurdy, sending the body crashing through the window to the street below. With McCurdy dead, Dave lowers his weapon, no longer bound by duty, allowing John to walk away. Realizing that bounty hunters or glory seekers will soon be after him, John decides it's time to leave town. His father begs him to stay, but John reassures him that they'll meet again. He rides off into the horizon. A year later, when Mary Alice passes away, John doesn't attend her funeral, but a faded red ribbon is found tied to her headstone. After his father's death, John never returns. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like button. If not, hit the dislike button twice just to be sure. Thank you for watching.